we're going to start. The Principal Van Story. From Lincolnshire Standard Tales. It's the Rum Life, Book 2, Boston, 1960 to 1970. By 1963, I had become not exactly disillusioned with my position at the Lincolnshire Standard, that is, rather unsure of my future. This particularly following a huge carpeting by my boss after being nicked for exceeding the standard 40 mph commercial vehicle speed limit of the time. I'd been charged with travelling at speed in excess of 75 mph in a Ford Thames 500 weight van with antique side valve Ford Pop engine and 3-speed gearbox. The ridiculousness of the estimated velocity of the van when loaded to the roof at the time with newspapers was incredible enough. Added to that was the fact that it all happened down a straight road 7 miles long in a thunderstorm, and I had passed numerous vehicles with the police car trying in vain to attract my attention. The first and lasting lesson that taught me was use your rear view door mirrors avidly, even if streaming with rain and condensation. The boss was so furious with the picture of his beloved vehicle fleet being treated in such a cavalier fashion that he plastered the story of my escapade on page 3 of the next edition. And to think that all that effort was for him in the first place. That blasted antique printing press had broken down again, and as I always seemed to get the jobs no one else would do, I was delegated to deliver these papers. The papers were so late they had missed the Milsons bus they normally travelled on to Horncastle. My task was to catch up with the bus, stop it, transfer the papers and get back to the office pronto to continue with my normal job of selling advertising space and copywriting. The fact that I was still very young, 19, and very enthusiastic had some influence on the way I took on the task, with all my heart. Can you imagine being placed in this situation? Catch up with the bus and stop it. The fact that I was eventually stopped by the police and had to endure a somewhat lengthy interview due to the circumstances meant that the bus had almost reached its destination by the time I caught it. The police had bells at that time, not sirens. As the police car was travelling through the same thunderstorm and driving rain behind me, his bell was somewhat difficult to hear. "Didn't you see my headlights flashing you?" inquired the slightly amused constable. My reply of, "I couldn't see anything through all that murk," did not help, especially as he then went on to state, "But you passed a tractor pulling a trailer loaded high with straw, then a breakdown lorry pulling a van. Didn't you see those either?" He finished his excited dialogue with, "It took me 4 miles to stop you." What could I say except, "But this is a Ford 500 weight van. It has a pushrod engine of about 0 horsepower. How could it possibly do over 75 miles per hour?" I think that clinched it. I was booked, hook, line and sinker. Lesson 2 was keeping a mouth shut, no matter how aggrieved you feel. So you see, I felt the boss was unfair in having a particular go at me. The vehicle fleet at the time, 1963, comprised the Mark I Anglia van of 4 years vintage and a relatively new minivan. There was a big but coming now. There were various departments within the newspaper company. The newspaper itself had numerous editions and several branch offices within the county. Based at head office in Boston were reporters 6, photographers 2, advertising staff 4, including myself, and office staff. Eddie, the office and circulation manager, needed to keep a close eye on his newsagents and pay them regular visits to collect dues. Eddie didn't drive, and never did right up until the day he died in 2007. Always cheerful and amusing, he seldom mentioned his particular skill as a wartime Lancaster bomber navigator. I was his regular chauffeur in one of the van fleet. We became good friends. All these good folk needed a vehicle to get out to their various engagements and functions. Private cars were still very few in number compared to the years to come. So you can see that getting one's hands on either of these much maligned four-wheeled chariots was a work of art. To add to the chagrin of the initial problem of actually finding a van was the additional complication of keeping accurate records of where, what, how, when and why you went in the said vehicle, all on the Department of Transport approved vehicle logbook, which had to be produced to an officer of the law on request. Finally, there was a general printing works. They frequently needed transport to deliver their finished goods and collect raw materials. Who was their driver of choice? I'll leave you to guess. That's the end of this little tale. I hope you've enjoyed listening. It's part of It's a Rum Life, Book 2, Boston 1960 to 1970. You can see lots more information on our website on the internet, www.crackerbooks.com. There's lots of videos you can watch quite free on YouTube. Just type in Keith Sanders, the short story man on YouTube. With a little shop as well. If you type in Richard Keith Sanders, all one line, .selz, selz.com. Thank you for listening.